Exploration of Cape Cod and the search for a settlement site by the Pilgrims, November–December 1620. The Pilgrims' journey to America was not just a tale of crossing the Atlantic. It was a story of exploration, resilience, and decision-making in the face of adversity. Upon arriving at Cape Cod, they began a series of critical expeditions to find a suitable place to settle. After a 66-day grueling voyage from England, the search for a new home was fraught with challenges, from navigating unfamiliar land to encountering Native American tribes. Despite the hardships, their careful exploration and evaluation of resources laid the foundation for one of the earliest successful English settlements in North America, Plymouth Colony. Background: arrival at Cape Cod after months of anticipation. The Mayflower finally anchored in Provincetown Harbour on November 11, 1620, Old Style, November 21st, New Style. The Pilgrims, led by English separatists, had hoped to settle near the Hudson River. However, a series of navigational errors, storms, and dangerous shoals forced them further north to Cape Cod. This unexpected turn of events marked the first step in their exploration of the New World. Once they had safely arrived, the Pilgrims knew that they had to make critical decisions quickly. The Mayflower Compact was signed that very same day, providing a framework for governance in their new settlement. This momentous decision set the tone for their self-reliance and commitment to unity. However, while Provincetown Harbour provided safe anchorage, the Pilgrims recognized that it was not suitable for a permanent settlement. The search for a more hospitable location would soon begin. The need for exploration. The Pilgrims quickly identified several issues with Provincetown Harbour that made it unsuitable for long-term habitation. The lack of fresh water, fertile soil, and the exposure to harsh weather conditions were just a few of the reasons that led them to seek a new site. It became clear that for the colony to thrive, they needed to find a location that provided access to clean water, fertile land for agriculture, and sufficient protection from the elements. Thus began a series of expeditions, each aimed at finding the ideal settlement site, one that would ensure the survival and prosperity of the Pilgrims in the coming years. They set off into the unknown, hoping to discover a place where they could build a sustainable community. The three major expeditions. First expedition, November 15, 1620. The first expedition, led by Miles Standish, included 16 men, including prominent figures such as William Bradford and Stephen Hopkins. The group ventured inland from Provincetown, through dense thickets and sand dunes. Their efforts were primarily focused on surveying the land and identifying any resources that could be useful for the settlement. While the group discovered some fresh water, they found it insufficient for the needs of a permanent settlement. Additionally, the land proved to be sandy and not ideal for agriculture. They also encountered Native American graves and a stash of corn, which they took for survival. This action was later acknowledged as theft, but it was deemed necessary given their desperate situation. Second expedition, late November 1620. The second expedition was a larger group, again led by Standish, that explored further inland and along the coast. They found more evidence of Native American habitation, such as abandoned houses and cultivated fields, as well as additional caches of corn and beans. However, their actions continued to disturb native sites, which heightened tensions with the local tribes. Despite discovering more resources, the group found no ideal settlement site. The land still lacked the key ingredients for survival, and the Pilgrims had to press on, knowing that they had to find a better location to establish their colony. Third expedition, early December 1620. The third and final expedition was led by Standish, and this time, the group traveled by shallop small boat. On December 8, 1620, they arrived at what is now known as Eastham's First Encounter Beach. Here, they had their first armed skirmish with the Norzite tribe. While arrows and musket shots were exchanged, no one was injured. This encounter marked a significant moment in the Pilgrims' interactions with the Native Americans, highlighting both the potential for conflict and the need for peaceful negotiations. After the skirmish, a storm forced the group to sail across Cape Cod Bay, where they eventually found what they had been searching for: a site with fresh water, fertile land, a deep harbor, and defensible high ground. This would become the location for the Plymouth settlement. Criteria for selecting a settlement site. The Pilgrims evaluated each potential site based on several practical and strategic criteria: access to fresh drinking water, essential for health and survival; defensibility, elevated ground for fortification against potential threats; protection from harsh weather, sheltered areas were preferred; deep, accessible harbor, needed for anchorage; unloading supplies, and future trade. Fertile land, for successful agriculture and self-sufficiency. Availability of natural resources, timber, wild game, and materials for fuel. Proximity to Native American tribes. While they sought trade opportunities, they also needed to avoid immediate adjacency to avoid potential conflict. These criteria guided the Pilgrims' decision-making process as they scouted each site and weighed the pros and cons. Key locations explored. Several areas along Cape Cod were explored by the Pilgrims, each of which played a role in their search for a suitable settlement. Provincetown Harbour, the site of the first landfall and the signing of the Mayflower Compact. Pilgrim Heights, High Head Truro, early explorations in search of resources. First encounter, beachy stem site of the first armed skirmish with the Nauzat tribe. Herring River Eastham, a campsite during explorations. Wellfleet Tavern site, explored for resources and information. Indian Neck Ossuary site, Wellfleet, archaeological evidence of Pilgrim presence. Nauzat Archaeological District, East Orleans, site of encounters with Native Americans. Khan site, Cape Cod, evidence of Pilgrim exploration. Scusset and Momomit Rivers, Cape Cod Canal, travel and exploration routes. Encounters with Native Americans. The Pilgrims' initial encounters with Native Americans were marked by caution and tension. The Nauzat and Pamit tribes observed the Pilgrims but avoided direct contact. However, the Pilgrims' appropriation of food supplies, such as corn, and the disturbance of native graves heightened tensions. The first significant encounter took place on December 8, 1620, when the Pilgrims and the Nauzat exchanged arrows and musket shots at First Encounter Beach. Thankfully, no one was injured, and both sides withdrew. The Pilgrims later repaid the Nauzat for the corn they had taken, and over time, they would establish more peaceful relations with the tribes. Discovery and selection of Plymouth. The third expedition, after the first encounter skirmish, ultimately led to the discovery of Plymouth. Located across Cape Cod Bay, Plymouth offered all the essential features the Pilgrims needed for a successful settlement: fresh water, fertile land, cleared fields, a good harbor, and defensible high ground. The area had once been home to a native village, but it had been decimated by a disease epidemic, leaving it uninhabited. This lack of a large resident native population made Plymouth the most suitable site for the Pilgrims to establish their colony. On December 16, 1620, the Mayflower sailed to Plymouth Harbour, and the Pilgrims began building their settlement. Conclusion: the Pilgrims' exploration of Cape Cod during November and December 1620 was a crucial period in their journey to establish Plymouth Colony. Through 3 major expeditions, they scouted the Outer Cape, encountered Native Americans, and evaluated sites based on essential resources. Their decision to settle at Plymouth was shaped by both practical needs and environmental realities. The careful evaluation of water, land, harbor, and defensibility ultimately led to the successful founding of Plymouth, which would go on to become a cornerstone of early American history.